The introduction. The rain fell softly on the asphalt, creating a rhythmic patter that blended with the sound of distant sirens echoing through the streets of downtown. A gray haze hung over the city, cloaking the buildings in a muted shroud. The flickering neon lights from a nearby diner cast a sickly glow onto the sidewalk, where the reflections of water pooled in uneven patches. For the denizens of this urban labyrinth, the evening was just another backdrop to their hurried lives. But for one individual, it would mark the eerie beginning of a disturbing chapter. In a modest tenement, nestled between a thrift store and an abandoned warehouse, a figure moved stealthily, discreetly. A woman in her early 30s had just returned home from her job as a nurse, her scrubs damp from the relentless drizzle. She fumbled with her keys, the lock stubbornly resisting her attempts. Inside her dimly lit apartment, she breathed a sigh of relief as she shut the door behind her. The small space was scattered with medical journals and the scent of lingering antiseptic. It had been a long day, and her body ached for rest. But outside, the world held its breath, the tension palpable. Just blocks away, a car idled in the shadows. Inside, a man with hollow eyes watched the woman through her window, a predator lurking, waiting patiently. This would not be an ordinary night, nor an ordinary crime. As the clock struck midnight, destinies would collide and lives would irrevocably change. The victim, Megan Carter, was known among her colleagues at St. Margaret's Hospital for her unwavering compassion. With shoulder-length chestnut hair that framed her freckled face, she was that familiar smile in a bustling environment, a guiding light for both her patients and coworkers. Yet, the hospital's sterile surroundings belied a deeper struggle within her life, one she valiantly battled beneath her cheerful demeanor. After acquiring a nursing degree, Megan was lauded for her tenacity, a go-getter in a demanding field where burnout hovered like specters. Behind her bright eyes rested shadows forged from years of restless nights, battling the weight of loss and loneliness since her sister's unexpected death a year prior. Her sister's passing had left a chasm that no amount of medical knowledge could heal, and Megan found solace in her work. Patients became her family, offering her fleeting moments of connection in a world that often felt solitary. Yet tonight was different. Stripped of her scrubs and nursing responsibilities, she found herself entwined in a routine she had cherished. A cup of chamomile tea, her favorite novel, and the gentle hum of rain against the window pane. Outside, the darkening clouds loomed ominously, and the streetlights flickered as if echoing her own disquiet. Unbeknownst to Megan, this night would not end with the calming lull of literature in her hands. Instead, it would unravel the fabric of her existence in ways she could never foresee, thrusting her into an abyss where light struggled to penetrate the thickening shadows of fate. The crime scene. The early morning light crept through the sheer curtains, illuminating the small apartment in muted hues. Outside, the city buzzed to life, oblivious to the stillness inside. As the clock edged past 6:00 a.m., silence lingered, profound and unsettling. It was around this time that a worried neighbor decided to knock on Megan's door. Sensing something amiss, perhaps it was the absence of the woman's familiar morning routine that stirred suspicion. When the door swung open, it creaked on its hinges like a prelude to tragedy. The heavy scent of dampness hung in the air, mingling with a faint trace of chamomile. The neighbor stepped inside, calling for Megan, her voice a soft, hesitant whisper that echoed in the hollow room. The tightly packed books and journals still lay in disarray. But as she moved further in, the oppressive stillness thickened. It wasn't long before reality twisted into something grotesque. The neighbor found her lying on the kitchen floor, eyes gazing vacantly at the ceiling. The world stilled in a tragic embrace. Panic surged through her, and she rushed out to call the authorities, unwilling to accept what her eyes had just witnessed. Within minutes, the calm of the apartment waned as the sharp sounds of sirens and shouting voices filled the hallway. Officers cordoned off the area, their faces grim as they entered the space. Detective Jane Harmon, a seasoned investigator, pushed past the threshold. The chaos of the outside world faded as she focused on this sacred ground of grief and violence, subtleties begging for recognition in the details. The way a chair tipped over, the coffee cup abandoned mid-sip, the shattered illusion of safety. This was not just a crime scene. It was a story waiting to be unveiled, a narrative etched in shadows and sorrow. The early investigation. Detective Jane Harmon knelt in the living room, examining the array of items strewn about. Relics of Megan Carter's life. The scent of chamomile still lingered in the air, a haunting reminder of the warmth that once filled this space, now overtaken by chilling uncertainty. As she studied the surroundings, she felt the weight of countless similar cases resting on her shoulders, each one a reminder of the fragility of life. The forensic team moved methodically, dusting for fingerprints and taking photographs, while Harmon directed their focus. What had begun as a routine check-in now threatened to unravel into a complex investigation. There were few signs of struggle, but every detail demanded scrutiny. The window was closed, the door locked. A woman like Megan, typically cautious, hadn't made an enemy that the police were aware of. As she stood, Harmon caught sight of a calendar on the wall, its pages revealing a life meticulously planned, yet punctuated with absence. One date stood out: a planned visit with her sister's close friend, an invitation made just weeks prior. Why the urgency for connection? Deciding to speak with a friend would be a crucial step. Perhaps she held pieces of a puzzle that seemed impossibly jumbled at this stage. As officers searched the apartment for personal effects that may have been taken, Harmon felt a shift in the air, as if the walls themselves harbored whispered secrets. She stepped outside to report initial findings to her sergeant, the dim morning light casting long shadows in the alley below. It was apparent that Megan's death had ignited a question: who would want to harm her and why? The investigation had only just begun, and Harmon could sense the deeper layers waiting to be unearthed beneath the tenant's ordinary life. The dead ends. Days turned into a blur of frantic leads and interviews as Detective Jane Harmon poured herself into the investigation, her focus razor-sharp despite the emotional turbulence surrounding it. At first, she found hope in every lead: a worried friend, a concerned neighbor, a fleeting mention of a potential love interest, but the trail grew increasingly cold. Megan's acquaintances painted a picture of a woman vibrant yet burdened by grief, and none could offer a plausible suspect or motive. Reluctantly, Harmon pored over Megan's digital life, scouring social media accounts, searching for messages that could hint at discord, unfamiliar contacts, or even online disputes that might have spiraled into something darker. Yet, each click brought more frustration. It was as if the very essence of Megan was intent on retreating from the lips of the living. One promising lead appeared when a technician at the hospital mentioned an odd interaction between Megan and another nurse a week before her death. Their brief, terse conversation raised eyebrows. But when Harmon tracked down the nurse, She found nothing more than a defense of Megan's character, insisting that nothing untoward had transpired. The admission felt more like a dead end than a breakthrough, an echo reverberating through her headlong pursuit of justice. Even the autopsy report failed to provide clarity. Though it confirmed foul play, toxicology screens revealed no traces of drugs or alcohol. No signs of a violent struggle either, only the chilling realization that Megan had faced her murderer alone. The wall appeared to close in on Harmon as evidence eluded her grasp, and she acknowledged a gnawing sensation in her gut. Was there something deeper, lurking in the shadows? A hidden truth woven between the fabric of Megan's life that remained just out of reach? A break in the case. As the investigation seemed to stall, a glimmer of hope emerged one languid afternoon when Detective Harmon received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end, shaky and hesitant, belonged to Sarah, Megan's sister's closest friend, who had reached out after reading about the case in the news. Hints of worry and grief seeped through her words as she expressed a sense of urgency. She revealed a secret previously unknown to her. Sarah described an argument she'd overheard during a recent gathering at a coffee shop. It was a mundane setting, rapidly transformed into a hotbed of emotion as Megan clashed with a colleague over work-related stress. Names left unspoken, but the intensity of their confrontation lingered in Sarah's memory. That particular nurse, whom they all knew, had always carried an air of jealousy towards Megan. Harmon's pen glided across the notepad as she listened, her instincts alight with cautious curiosity. The woman was identified as Claire, a nurse whose resentment toward Megan's success painted a compelling portrait of potential motive. Harmon immediately reached out to the hospital's human resources department to gain clarity on Claire's behavior and history. What initially felt like loose threads of confidence now began to weave into a tapestry of suspicion. Digging further, Harmon learned that Claire had exhibited signs of escalating emotional distress, consistently citing burnout and envy. Interviews with her colleagues confirmed a pattern of passive aggression directed toward Megan, whispers tucked away in the corners of break rooms, snide comments couched in warm smiles. Perhaps there was more behind the surface than mere rivalry. Feeling the adrenaline surge, Harmon arranged to confront Claire. As much as her investigation had treaded softly through treacherous waters, a new path had emerged, and she was ready to follow it into the depths of the unknown. The suspect, Detective Jane Harmon, stood outside the doorway of Claire's apartment, her heart racing with anticipation. The air was thick with a palpable tension as she prepared to confront the woman whose name had surfaced repeatedly in connection with Megan's death. Claire's place was on a quiet street lined with blooming cherry blossom trees. The delicate petals fluttered to the ground, oblivious to the turmoil brewing within. Harmon had readied herself for this moment, reviewing the details of Claire's history and sketching a profile of their potential encounter. She knocked firmly, the sound echoing ominous. Moments later, the door creaked open with a hesitant pull, revealing Claire, her eyes betraying an undercurrent of anxiety, quickly masked by an artificial smile. "Detective Harmon," she greeted, an edge of forced cheeriness in her voice. "What can I do for you?" In that moment, Harmon absorbed the details: Claire's disheveled hair, the tiredness etched around her eyes, and the hesitance that lingered in her posture. It seemed the pressure of scrutiny weighed heavily on her. Harmon introduced herself professionally, expressing her need to ask some questions regarding Megan's case. inviting her into the living room. Claire feigned ease, but Harmon noted the flicker of something darker in her gaze. As the conversation unfolded, Claire spoke fervently about her struggles, weaving stories of exhaustion and frustration within the demanding nursing environment. Each word dripped with a tone of resentment, and Harmon watched for the signs, ever vigilant. With calculated precision, she steered the discussion toward Megan, gauging Claire's reaction. The air turned electric when she broached the subject of their argument. Claire's demeanor shifted, her voice tense as she defended herself. "I would never hurt." "Shh." We disagreed, but it was just talk. Yet Harmon sensed the cracks in her facade, the slight tremor in her hands, and the unsteady breath that followed her insistence of innocence. With every question, revelations flared like wildfire, and Harmon understood that the layers of Claire's anguish ran deeper than mere professional rivalry. The conversation felt like a tightening noose, as unspoken truths loomed heavy and charged. And there was no turning back. The trial. The atmosphere inside the courthouse was tense, a palpable mixture of anticipation and anxiety mingling among the gathered crowd. Detective Jane Harmon sat quietly among the spectators, a place reserved for those who bore witness to the journey from tragedy to justice. The wood-paneled walls loomed around her, each polished surface a reminder of the weight of the proceedings about to unfold. As the trial commenced, the courtroom buzzed with an electric energy. Claire, now the accused, sat framed in the defendant's chair, her expression a mask of defiance and uncertainty. Harmon's thoughts drifted back to that fraught exchange in Claire's apartment only months prior, tracing the subtle clues that had formed the basis for the charge of murder. Now, they were poised to lay bare the emotional upheaval that had brewed in the shadows. The first day of testimony painted a portrait of Megan's life, one marked with light and shadow. Colleagues recounted her dedication, sharing anecdotes that reflected a woman who had uplifted and encouraged those around her. Yet with each supportive recounting came the slow, creeping acknowledgement of Claire's resentment, articulated through the testimonies that unraveled before the jury. Harmon felt the mounting anxiety ripple through the room as Claire's character was scrutinized under the blaring spotlight of the prosecution. Witness after witness detailed the simmering tension in the workplace, the jealousies that boiled just beneath the surface, and the ecosystem of negativity that Claire had cultivated around herself. Claire's demeanor fluctuated. At times she appeared composed, while at others, panic echoed behind her tightened fists. Each day brought fresh insights and building momentum toward their conviction. As Harmon listened to the arguments unfold, she could almost feel the collective breath of the audience, the weight of Megan's absence pressing on their shoulders. The trial had become more than a mere examination of facts. It was a reckoning, a ritual reclaiming the life that had been so unjustly stripped away. With the closing statements imminent, Harmon knew that justice was not merely a judgment rendered by a jury, but a reflection of the enduring quest for truth that had sparked this journey from loss to resolution. The aftermath. The verdict had been delivered, slicing through the tense atmosphere like a blade guilty as charged. In the wake of the trial, the world felt irrevocably changed, echoing with the consequences of actions that reached far beyond the courtroom's wall. As the gavel struck, signaling the end of this chapter, a quiet storm brewed in Detective Jane Harmon's chest. Outside the courthouse, a spectral hush fell over the gathered crowd. Some clutched each other in silent support. Others wore expressions of disbelief, grappling with the stark reality of loss. Like Megan's life, the pendulum of justice had swung, But that didn't erase the ache of her absence. Harmon stood among the throng, watching as family members and friends of Megan slowly stepped forward, grief etched across their faces, yet echoes of relief reverberating within their expressions. Even as the guilty had been held accountable, the heartache lingered, clouded by the shadows of what could never be undone. In the weeks that followed, Harmon found herself reflecting on the deeper implications of the case. The cycle of trauma and loss, interwoven with the everyday lives of those in the field of healing, weighed heavily on her mind. Megan's story had served as both a poignant reminder of vulnerability and as a harbinger of the need for connection in a world often marred by silence. Stepping into St. Margaret's Hospital for the first time post-trial, Harmon was met with an air of somber pride. Staff members exchanged weary glances, loaded with unspoken understanding. They had borne witness to the aftermath alongside Harmon, and she found herself caught in a complex web of emotions she had often set aside in her pursuit of justice. As she navigated the hospital halls, Harmon felt the vibrant energy of health and healing. Yet a shadow followed Megan's presence, lingering in every corner, a testament to the fragility of life and the importance of raising one another up. The conversations she had sought to have, the connections she had hoped to strengthen, now felt integral to her mission. Justice might have been served, but the journey toward healing was just beginning. Harmon walked forward, determined to advocate not just for the cases that crossed her desk, but for the humanity woven in the lives that surrounded them. Reflection. Sitting at her desk late one evening, Detective Jane Harmon stared at the flickering computer screen, her mind adrift in reflection. The events of the past months replayed in an endless loop as she sifted through the photographs and notes from the Case.Shadows' radiant smile, juxtaposed against the harrowing details of her final days. While each page conveyed the essence of a woman who had devoted her life to healing, yet had become a victim of the very shadows that can lie hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. Harmon had always believed in the calling of her profession, the sheer determination to uncover the truth regardless of how painful it may be. But now, as she sat enveloped in solitude, she recognized the emotional toll that such a path exacted. The case was closed. Justice had been found. Yet the specter of loss still haunted her thoughts. She could no longer ignore the fragility of human existence. Conversations had been precipitated by tragedy, connections forged in the crucible of grief. It became clear to her that the true measure of success as an investigator lay not merely in convictions, but in advocating for understanding, compassion, and healing within a community intertwined by shared experiences. As she leaned back in her chair, Harmon resolved to carry Megan's memory forward, an embodiment of resilience, and a reminder of the dedication required to ensure that no one else would have to face the darkness alone.